A lot of leaders will say, well, I have less budget, I have less headcount, and I'm expected to do more with less.
This comes back to this concept of not overinvesting in a company, even when you can. What doing more with less actually does is help you prioritize what to focus on.
It doesn't matter how long you work in sales. Your career will see ups and downs. When macroeconomic conditions take a turn for the uncertain, budgets tighten, spending slows, and layoffs loom, revenue leaders must guide their teams and their companies through these challenges. That means growing revenue, even when growth seems impossible. Many people hear that and think, great, I have to do more with less. But Kyle and his guest are going to talk about something a bit different. On this episode, Kyle is talking with someone who has managed through adversity, from the dot-com bubble in '99 through the financial crisis in 2008. Steve Singh is a managing director at Madrona Venture Group in Seattle, and exactly the kind of leader you need advice from right now.
I'm Kyle Coleman, sales pro turned SVP of marketing at Clary. Run Revenue is the show where revenue pros learn to stop revenue leak, achieve revenue precision, and grow their companies and careers.
This is Run Revenue with Kyle Coleman.
Let's jump in to your background. You started at Concur in 1993. You were there for 24 years.
Yeah.
IPO in 1998 at $13 a share. And then a year later, the internet bubble bursts. So tell us about that. Tell us about that journey to IPO and then what it was like to be through the bubble burst.
Look, I have the good fortune of working with a lot of incredible people. It took 15 plus years of just grinding it out at Concur before anyone knew that company even existed. I remember the first couple of stories that were written about Concur was, hey, we're an overnight success. There was nothing overnight about it. It was the first time that many people had heard about it. So from their point of view, yes, it was an overnight success. But the reality is it's digging into details, really trying to make sure that whatever you do, you're the best in the world at, and delivering value to customers that they look at and say, look, I can't function without this value. This is really critical to how I operate my business. It's a richly rewarding experience, right? That journey, even though it took 25 years to complete, that journey was so rewarding, not just in the metrics around the business, but the friendships that you build, working through really hard problems with people that add incredible value to that problem set. That's what makes life amazing.
So that's 24, 25 years that you were at Concur. You had the dot-com bubble in 99, and then you had the great financial crisis in '08. So you've been through it all. You've seen your fair share of adversity. So you just mentioned a handful of things that you really prize in the relationship that you're building and the relentless focus on customer. I'm curious, what advice are you giving leaders today?
Part of what I loved about the culture of Concur, and certainly what drives me as a human being, is look, I want to be better at understanding my business, the industry that I'm operating in, the customers that I'm serving. I want to be better at understanding those things than anyone else in the world. And I mean anyone else in the world, like not just better than my competition, not just better than the two other companies that might be in vogue that year. I want to be better at this. I want my company to be better at this than anyone else in the world. And that desire is really important. That desire to say, look, every day you got to get better is critically important. The next piece is, as you get older, you realize that, look, success is far easier to define than you had originally thought. To me, 99% of success is showing up and doing the work. The other 1%, I might argue, is even harder, which is knowing what work to do, right? In prioritizing the things that you really have to focus on. All of us, no matter who you are, you have lots of different choices in life. Figuring out which choice is the one you want to go focus on, whether that's as an individual or as a business, is critically important, because then it enables you to have the chance to apply that other 99% of the effort to say, look, I'm going to be incredible at this particular set of tasks. In our case at Concur, it was, can we build the best expense management company in the world? Can we get rid of the concept of expense reporting for customers? And that became a real driver of success. I get to work with incredible people these days, and these are the next generation of entrepreneurs. They're building the companies that will replace the legacy companies that I was a part of, that others before me were a part of. And the thing that I really try to make sure I focus on with these incredible individuals is that there's a couple elements that they have to get right. The first is there has to be a deep-rooted culture at the individual level and at the corporate level in wanting to be the very best in the world at understanding your customer, your business, the marketplace you operate in, literally every detail of your business. Now, what's really interesting is the individuals who are the most successful, the companies that are the most successful, they share a couple of common attributes. Right? Number one is they actually understand what to go focus on. And number two is they're really well instrumented. And those two things go hand in hand. They understand every single metric of their business, whether it's what features are being most consumed by our customers, what's the value those features are delivering, how do we get better at deploying our products and making sure our customers can actually drive value out of our products, how do we get better at filling the top of the funnel, how do we get better at making sure that the movement through the funnel, as that customer discovers more about your product, that they look at it and say, boy, this is incredible value for me. How do you get them to actually then commit to being a customer and building a lifelong relationship with you? Those metrics come from instrumentation. And this is what I find really amazing about these people is that they're not only committed to making sure they understand what to work on, they're instrumenting the heck out of their business to make sure that they really understand how to go drive increasing value across their business.
I love so much about that, Steve. And that takes us back to the theme of this episode, how to grow revenue without growing budget, without growing headcount. So take us now back to kind of 2008, 2009, you're COO at Concur. How are you helping prioritize the right things? How are you helping make sure that you are focused on the right work to do and then instrumenting that work to happen? Give us an example or two of how you did that.
Yeah. So look, the hard part about running the business is getting the most accurate and most complete set of data, right? So one of the things that we invested a fair bit in is instrumentation. And that instrumentation really, one of the things I will tell you, just give you an example that one of the things we saw right before the 2008, 2009 financial crisis is we saw in hourly data feeds in our product on what customers were booking in travel. And normally travel is booked many weeks out in advance. And we saw about 8 weeks in advance that travel was just precipitously dropping. Right? That we saw that, hey, boy, there was a 40% decrease in travel 8 weeks out. And that's unusual. So because we had that information, we said, look, something is going on that isn't completely obvious in the outside world. And we need to start thinking about what does that mean to us and how do we adjust our business? At that time, we were a company that was growing about 25% a year and generating about 10% cash flow margins, right? So really good and at scale. We were a great business. But then we said, hey, look, there's a likely, if you combine that with the rest of the information that was out and available in the world, you knew that there was an economic slowdown coming in. Turns out to be a massive financial crisis that actually hit. And so we were way ahead of making a decision on, hey, look, let's freeze hiring. Let's think about what's happening and let's see as the data unfolds, let's determine how we want to proceed. And because we actually slowed the rate of hiring, we were in a position where we were not forced to cut costs. We were not forced to say, hey, look, you know what, we got caught blindsided and we don't know how to react. And therefore, we got to take drastic actions. We did no drastic actions. In fact, what we saw in the forward year is while most companies saw their revenues decline year over year, we saw our revenues go up 15% year over year. And frankly, our profits nearly triple on a year over year. We went from 10% or thereabouts in operating profits to about 26% in operating profit. And that was largely because, look, our revenue was largely predictable and locked in. And because we moderated our investments in new growth, we were able to see that show up immediately in benefits to the operating income line. And that's just a simple example of what instrumenting your business and understanding every driver of your business allows you to do. Like on the revenue side, on the opposite side of the equation, like back then clarity didn't exist. And so I didn't have the benefit of really looking at this and saying, I can predict what business is going to close.
Right.
So we did this much more manually, right? We pulled out spreadsheets, we pulled out analytics on that data set, and we started looking at what were the first signals of recovering economic environment and found that, in fact, through our data, we realized that the peak of unemployment would hit 10.2, 10.3%. That was our forecast. Turned out to be pretty close to accurate. I think the unemployment peaked at 10.2%. And we knew that once it hit that, it would start to actually recover. And so because of that, we really started thinking about those investments in sales and marketing and how we actually started to look at early signals on close rates, early signals on ongoing customer adoption of our product, and use that to determine when we wanted to step on the gas on incremental investments in sales and marketing. And in the forward years, by the way, we went right back to 25 to 30% growth rates, but we did it with incredible discipline, right? We were growing at 25 to 30% a year from there on while still being very profitable.
Super interesting, Steve. And one of the insights here is you had the foresight to make the decision to freeze hiring. And with the people that you had, you still drove incredible results. You're talking about tripling profit margins. You're talking
Yeah.
about all these different outcomes that happen. So what did you do to optimize the output of the people that you did have? Were there any changes that you had to make? Was there any way that you pointed them in a different direction?
The very first thing is around this concept of transparency, right? The more information you share across your enterprise, the better your people can perform, right? When people have more information, they make better decisions and they perform, frankly, without oversight. And that's a concept that I think is being enabled in today's era of computing, right? Today, with cloud native architectures, what's happening is we're getting A, real-time information about the metrics in our business. B, that information is available to everybody in the business. And if it's available to everybody in the business, not surprisingly, better decisions are made. So that was a piece, right? We were very transparent with all of our information. Now that's incredibly easy to be transparent with information and make that information available in real time. The second is we're also transparent and very direct about how we thought about the use of capital. Right? Look, disciplined growth is back in fashion today. And I would argue for the very best companies, it was never out of fashion. It's companies that have never seen a down cycle, never seen challenges, that think things always go well, and they invest without discipline. The reason why discipline is important is not just that it's a great way of allocating capital. Discipline brings out all the flaws in your business. Right? If you run your business with discipline and not overfund every part of the business or any part of the business, frankly, what ends up happening is the components of your business that are weak, they show through. And when they show through, guess what great people do? They go fix those problems.
That's right.
And as you fix those problems, you become stronger as a business. And then what happens is the rate of growth relative to every competitor, it starts to eclipse the competitors. There's an opportunity for great businesses to thrive and separate themselves from the pack.
That mindset that you have is so interesting, Steve. And you mentioned it. A lot of business leaders, they think about the macroeconomic environment and it's a bit, oh, that's out of my control. Woe is me, or this is happening to me and there's nothing we can do about it. The story that you just told is you had a forecast about unemployment. You made the macro environment meaningful to you from a data perspective and leveraged it to make decisions in a forward-looking way. It's a really interesting way for you to take back control of things that otherwise maybe are not, strictly speaking, in your control.
It's always execution in context, right? And the reality is there's always going to be variables you cannot control. But that doesn't mean you can't learn from those variables or learn from those contextual environments and say, how do I improve the quality of my own performance, improve the quality of my business? And that's what we did when we saw the unemployment go up and the economic environment become more challenging, is we took it as an opportunity to drive better performance in how we deployed customers, better performance in the value proposition we delivered to the customers. Yes, we lowered our rate of investment. We still increased investments year over year, but we lowered the rate of that increase. And we did that because we had data faster than anybody else. And we had the courage to go take action with that information. Could we control the economic environment? Not a chance in the world. But could we benefit from it? Absolutely. It's the company that doesn't see that data. It's the management teams that won't make hard decisions to say, okay, I may not be able to control this, but I can benefit from it. I can start to have a competitive advantage because of this. Those companies, they will always struggle, right? Because it's always difficult choices. Coming back to that 99% of life of success is showing up and doing the work. 1% is finding out what work to do. Both are equally important.
And a perfect segue into the current state of your career here, Steve. You're managing director at Madrona Venture Group. You are the chairman or board member of, I think, 9 different companies right now, all at once.
Yeah.
Pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing undisciplined spend? Where are you seeing bloat? What kind of advice are you giving when you do see that?
Yeah, I think, again, this sounds obvious when you're in the middle of it, and now everybody's starting to think that way, but it's not. It's only obvious to the really thoughtful, introspective companies and leaders. And what we found was, look, there is too many companies that were chasing growth without understanding the cost of that growth and counting on the fact that, hey, once I have the customer, they'll become profitable over time for me. And I would argue that's not the right model. It never was, never will be. And the only time it is when money is cheap and when you're undisciplined. You have to accept that you're undisciplined when you think that chasing growth at all costs is the right answer. And so we see that in some companies. Having open, honest conversations with people, helping them understand, like, hey, look, businesses are built over decades. Great businesses are built over decades. They're not built in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They're built over decades. Team that wins is the team that can drive disciplined action on a sustainable basis across their entire company. And that always comes from data. It always comes from prioritizing what you're going to go focus on. And look, I'm fortunate. The vast majority of the companies that I'm working with, they were never focused on growth at all costs, because that just wasn't the nature of the human beings that were running these businesses. That doesn't mean we don't all make mistakes from time to time. Trick is when you make the mistake to come back to your center and say, hey, look, is this consistent with the principles that I'm trying to build a business by? Is this consistent with the fact that my business will take decades to build because I want it to endure for decades after I'm.
So a few key principles here, Steve. And what you're saying is it's not rocket science, but it is certainly science to some degree. Transparency and visibility, and ensuring that you have the key data points, and you're democratizing as much as you can across the company to empower people to make decisions in more or less real time.
Yeah.
You're talking about governance and control over key processes, including, of course, how you're deploying capital, the revenue that you're bringing in, critical.
Look, one of the things that's great about companies that are well instrumented is they know what to focus on. But what's really great about it is when you outperform in one part of the business, let's just say you're a better innovator as a company than anyone else. What's really amazing about it is you start to outperform in every other part of the business. It's a great flywheel effect, right? But you can't outperform unless you know what the issues are, unless you know the metrics, unless you understand what's your performance compared to what you want it to be, compared to best in class, compared to the most efficient use of capital, when you think about it in that context. And that's critically important, right? Success begets success. That's where it really comes from, right? And so that's something that I just think it's just one of the wonderful things about discipline and companies that are well instrumented is they succeed in one part of the business. And because they understand every single metric and how that interrelates to other metrics, not surprisingly, they succeed in other parts of the business.
A lot of leaders, departmental leaders, company leaders, whatever it may be, they'll see a problem and they'll paper over the problem, or they'll shy away from it, or it won't be something that they tackle.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from you, Steve, is see a problem, identify a problem, run toward the fire. Go figure out as fast as you can. You're going to get burned every now and again, but you have to put that fire out. And once you build that muscle of firefighting, putting out the brightest burning fires, figuring out the problems, then you can translate that across departments, across the.
And to be fair, if you do it well enough, you don't get fired, which is, hey, you know what? This part of the business is operating at 50% better than my competitors, but 10% lower than best-in-class companies, maybe in different industries. And because you start to raise the bar on what you expect of yourself and every company. Look, some of the things that are, I think, is part of human nature that you see out there that are frustrating is there's always a very first instinct is always to say, hey, look, this problem exists because of things you can't control. And I think this is the part where it's always a good signal as an investor, as a board member, to look at this and say, boy, this is an opportunity to grow as a human being at the CEO level or any management level. If you think the problem is somebody else's, or if you think the problem is something you can't control, that's a learning opportunity. And if you can't learn from that, there'll be somebody better that comes along and either wins in that market segment, or somebody that replaces those individuals. And I think these are, again, nothing sophisticated about understanding what it takes to succeed. It's just the discipline, and the hard part is living it, actually executing to it.
And I have to imagine that this advice of discipline is advice that you're finding yourself giving to your portfolio companies over and over again. Certainly, the market is no longer rewarding, as you said, growth at all costs. And
yeah,
please.
And Kyle, honestly, one of the things that I'm loving right now is across these 9 companies, we're having the time of our life right now, because guess what? These companies are thriving because of that ingrained discipline, that ingrained instrumentation, that ingrained desire to say, I want to be better every single day on a metrics basis, not just aspirational, but on a metrics basis. And literally, there's no better time than right now to build great businesses. Like, this is when, great businesses shine.
Give us an example of some of those metrics. You're talking the 1% better every day is. Give us an example of how you're measuring this and what kind of advice you'd have, maybe specifically for revenue teams.
Being able to predict what business is going to close in the quarter enables you to think more strategically about spend, about where you're going to make your investments. And if we're really candid in how we think about our own businesses, each leader should be asking themselves, do I know within a 1% margin of error what business is going to close this quarter? If the answer to that is yes, boy, you are far ahead of everybody else. And I'm talking about net new business, right? Now you could take that information and say, I know how to allocate additional investment to go drive that growth to be disciplined, but even more. If the answer to that question is no, you are at a massive disadvantage to cultures that are all about metrics, to organizations that instrument their businesses. And I would argue there should never be a day when you don't understand every line item of expense in your company, what you're going to show up with on total expenditures across your business, whether it's on a daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis. And there should never be a day you don't understand what business you're going to close and what your revenue is going to be in that period. And if you don't, then to me, this is a process issue, and there's the right tools. Get the right tools, get the right process, get the right leaders to solve that problem. And this is one of the things that look, I love, look, obviously I'm a bit biased here, but every one of my companies uses Clarity. And guess what our board meetings are like? We open up Clarity and we talk about what business is going to close in the period. One day in the not too distant future, companies are going to use products like Stratify to say, what does my real-time P&L look like? What's my real-time forecast for the rest of my year look like? Board meetings, exec staff meetings, any kind of operating meetings will be run in real-time applications. They won't be run in PowerPoint. They won't be run printed out a set of metrics that are 30, 60, 90 days old. They'll be, this is the information as of right this minute. And that to me is that's going to separate the really good companies from the incredible companies.
Take us inside the boardroom, Steve, and tell us a little bit about what you see or hear from executives that you say, this person has it. This person knows the business. They are instrumented. They've got this on lockdown. What are the signals? What are you looking for to have that kind of faith in leadership?
What's consistent across those leaders that you're inspired by is when they instrument a business, it's not just they know where they stand on that particular metric in revenue ops or in spend management, whatever it might be. It frees them to understand the why. Well, why is their close rate moving up? Why is the close rate moving down? Right? Why did the customer choose them over somebody else? That understanding of the why is driven by the fact that your core business generates metrics that you can take real value from and real understanding from. And that's where I get excited at a board meeting is when the CEO, they're laying out the metrics, ideally in Clarity or in a Stratify or something of that nature. But then the conversation turns to what's driving all this.
Right.
What are the behaviors in the market? What are the behaviors at the customer level that's driving this? Because that shows, to me anyways, as an investor and as a board member, a deep level of understanding. And from that understanding, you have trust. I trust that individual to make the right decision. Like, we're not going to always make the right decision, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to make the right decision because they're armed with data. And that data frees them to analyze and think about what to do with that information.
That's so interesting, Steve, because a lot of people will say, if I am just swimming in data, then I'm going to be in a board meeting and I'm just reporting the news. I'm just going to be giving a readout. But what you're saying is having all of the data there allows you to skip that kind of reporting the news and have a strategic conversation about what's happening, why it's happening, and what to do next.
Look, what we're finding in this whole conversation around foundational models is that you're going to see this AI set of benefits being built into every business application, every single one. And so it's starting to understand those set of metrics and allow you to think about the why. Look, we are 5 years, 6 years, 7 years ahead of the industry on this. And so what Clarity has delivered in RevOps, in our ability to understand what business we're going to close, what's happening with our win rates, why are we moving up or down as a business in our win rates, that huge chunks of that understanding are being delivered as a part of the daily services or daily features of Clarity. And it allows me to think about the whys underneath that. But that's going to end up showing up in every single application. And to me, this is what gives me a lot of hope about businesses becoming, frankly, better value for the customers over time.
Speaking of better value, you said something to me. We were talking about this a few months ago, the same topic. And you said something to me that's really stuck with me. A lot of leaders will say, I have less budget. I have less headcount, and I'm expected to do more with less. And what you said to me, Steve, you said, no, it's not about doing more with less. It's about doing better with less.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
This comes back to this concept of not overinvesting in a company, even when you can, right? When you don't overinvest, you start to see that things aren't exactly optimal. They're not where you want them to be. And in an environment where capital is more expensive, you're forced to look at, hey, look, I have to do more with less. But I would ask every leader to turn that around and say, look, had I thought about running the business this way from the get-go, what this doing more with less actually does is help you prioritize what to focus on, right? Because you only have so much in dollars you can invest and so much, frankly, of your time that you can invest. So you have to pick what are the metrics that matter. And this, to me, comes all the way back to understanding that 1%, understanding what to focus on. The only way you can understand what to focus on is you got to instrument everything. Then you got to understand the interrelationships of those metrics, because then as you start to improve the performance in one area, not surprisingly, it starts to improve the performance elsewhere. And that process of choosing, saying, I'm not doing these things, I'm doing this, it's a discipline that unlocks incredible value because it becomes part of the culture of the company, how people learn to prioritize, how they look at it and say, well, geez, I can drive better performance here and help my colleagues in 3 other parts of the business. It comes from having to make choices. It doesn't come from saying I do everything. So this idea of having to do more with less is an incredible blessing and an incredible opportunity for the best leaders in the world.
Something that I see really effective leaders do is when they're making these decisions about what to do and what not to do, very intentional decisions about what not to do, they share both lists with their teams, with their companies, whatever it may be, which is here is the slide, here's the page, whatever of the things that we're committed to. And just as important, here is the slide of things we are not doing by design.
Yeah, that is awesome, right? It allows everyone to prioritize and allows everyone to know that we are making that decision collectively, right? The whole organization is going to rally around that and focus around those set of points that you are prioritizing. Like, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but this is why I'm excited about this era of company building is this forces a level of discipline that it's a crucible. It'll yield the very best companies in the world. I just happen to be lucky enough to be involved in many of those companies, with Clary being actually the largest of the companies that I'm involved in. And frankly, that comes from the fact that they were very prescient, thinking about how machine learning and artificial intelligence was going to go drive improvements in a business process that is pretty central to how we all run, right? Signing customers, driving new business is everything. And anybody who thinks that they can't grow in this environment is missing the point.
You're spot on. And the data tells you that. You look at these last few decades where we've been in similar times with high inflation and tough macro, and Google was born, Salesforce was born, Airbnb, Amazon.com, whatever it may be. The list goes on. And so it is not impossible. This has been a very hopeful little session here, Steve. Any closing thoughts for company leaders?
This is a journey. Have an incredible time. Share information across your business. You'd be amazed at what your people are capable of doing when they're given as much information as possible around their business. If at all possible, make that information real time. It shouldn't be us communicating with one another. It should be systems in your business, surfacing that data and making it available to whoever needs it. That unlocks the real power of the organization. And that's the incredible human beings that you get to go through life with.
Incredible, Steve. Thank you so much. A masterclass in leadership, in discipline, in growth. I really appreciate it.
Don't let what you heard today go to waste. Take 2 seconds to check out the show notes to learn more about stopping revenue leak and achieving revenue precision. The content is always free, never gated. You will not become a lead, and you're not going to get hounded endlessly, we promise. If you like what you heard, be sure to give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. We'll be back next time with more tips to stop revenue leak and get you running revenue like a pro.